My brother's girlfriend assumed I was just a broke loser. She didn't know the agency she worked for was in the empire I owned. So, I cancelled her lucrative contract. Original post. Third, I am 35 years old, grew up in the rainy, gray suburbs of Portland, Oregon, and now I live in Seattle. If you were to ask my family to describe me, they would say I'm the quiet one. The dependable shadow. The guy who will pick up the phone at 3 a.m. without asking questions, loan you a few grand without expecting a repayment schedule, and help you move a heavy mahogany dresser up 3 flights of stairs just because you decided the feng shui in your apartment was slightly off. For the longest time, I honestly never minded being that guy. I accepted my role as the background player, the NPC in everyone else's grand, dramatic storyline. But there is a very funny, dangerous thing about constantly being underestimated by the people closest to you. Eventually, they get so comfortable standing on your back that they completely forget to watch their mouths around you. My younger brother, Liam, is 28. He just bought a gorgeous, waterfront condo in downtown Seattle with the help of our parents. And when I say help, I don't mean they co-signed a modest loan. I mean they essentially handed him a massive down payment on a silver platter after he secured a mid-level sales job that had lasted, I kid you not, exactly 3 months. My mother tearfully called it an investment in his brilliant future. It was hilarious to me. When I started my tech business 10 years ago, out of a damp, freezing basement, eating instant ramen and coding until my eyes bled, they called it a highly irresponsible phase, and refused to lend me even $500 for server space. That irresponsible phase is now called E-Tech Nexus. We currently have 42 full-time employees, massive state government contracts, and a valuation that would make my father choke on his morning coffee, but I never bring it up. I drive a reliable, 5-year-old sedan, I wear plain black t-shirts, and I don't flaunt my wealth. It's just not who I am. Anyway, Liam's mandatory housewarming party was last Saturday. It was one of those incredibly awkward, obligatory family gatherings where everyone brings an overpriced bottle of wine, pretends to genuinely enjoy the bland hummus platter, and makes exaggerated, breathless comments about the quality of the crown molding. I arrived at the party about 45 minutes late. It wasn't an intentional power play. The traffic on I-5 North was simply a nightmare of red taillights and blinding rain. By the time I walked into the open-concept living room, Liam's new girlfriend, Chloe, zeroed in on me. She gave me a slow, deliberate once-over, her eyes dragging from my damp jacket down to my scuffed boots like she was scanning a barcode on a clearance rack item and finding it severely lacking. She was all pearly white smiles and fake, air-kissing cheeks, but you could see the absolute judgment swimming in her eyes. It was the kind of judgment that is meticulously sugar-coated in every syllable, but sharp enough to slice you to the bone if you aren't paying attention. "Oh, wow, you actually made it," she said, her tone syrupy sweet and dripping with condescension. "We were starting to wonder if you were going to start crashing here on the couch now that Liam finally got a real place of his own." She laughed. Not like it was a lighthearted joke, but like it was an inside joke she assumed everyone else in the room was already in on. Liam chuckled loudly, sipping his craft beer. My mom did her signature tight-lipped, nervous smirk. My dad, always playing the useless diplomat, gave a hollow laugh and muttered, "Let it go, Chloe, you're making this awkward." But she didn't let it go. That was just her warm-up routine. The thing about Chloe is that she possesses that specific brand of snobbery that comes from trying way too hard to appear effortlessly superior. She kept aggressively touching her blowout, name-dropping exclusive restaurants in Manhattan she supposedly frequented, and constantly circling back to how humble beginnings are so important for people like me. It was the kind of talk that only sounds kind if you aren't listening closely. She was digging her nails in deep. I just think it's so inspiring that Liam is working his way up the corporate ladder and that you guys are still so close. Some people get incredibly weird and jealous when their younger siblings do so much better than them in life, she said later, leaning over a platter of brie and artisanal crackers. But not you, Ethan. You're just so impressively chill about not having much going on. I nodded slowly, smiled tightly, and changed the subject. I always change the subject. It's a survival habit now, baked into my muscle memory. But she wasn't done. At one point, while we were all gathered around the massive quartz kitchen island, Chloe leaned in and asked, "So, what is it you actually do again, Ethan?" She said it slowly, enunciating every word as if I worked behind a register fixing cracked iPhone screens at a mall kiosk. I was about to give my standard, vague answer when Liam cut in. "Ethan has some little tech support thing. He's been doing it out of his apartment forever." "Right," Chloe said, waving a manicured hand dismissively. "Startups are so cute. I did a couple of major consulting projects for a startup through our firm, you know, Apex Strategies. We manage a bunch of high-level contracts for local businesses. It's honestly wild how many of these small business owners just, don't know what they're doing with their data." I blinked. The room suddenly felt very still. "Apex Strategies?" I asked, careful not to sound too interested. keeping my voice perfectly flat. She smiled like she'd just been handed a trophy. Yeah, I'm a senior account strategist. I basically handle the brand partnerships and back-end optimizations. A lot of small fish, no offense to your little business, but it pays the bills incredibly well. I felt my jaw tick just slightly. It wasn't just what she said, it was the suffocating smugness underneath the subtle jab, the automatic assumption that I was, by default, the small fish in the pond. It was the first time I fully realized she didn't just think I was beneath her, she had absolutely no clue I was the ocean she was currently swimming in. See, one of the massive, multi-million-dollar contracts my company holds is with a mid-size marketing agency. We handle their entire data infrastructure, their back-end automation, and as of 6 months ago, we were tapped to renew a massive 3-year extension through a state tech subsidy pilot. That exact agency is Apex Strategies. We manage 90% of their operating platforms. My personal digital signature is on every single compliance report they submit to the state, but I said nothing. Not yet. I just stood there and watched her brag to my aunt about how utterly exhausting it was to deal with low-budget clients who couldn't afford proper CRM systems. I watched my dad nod and smile and sip his beer like it was simply easier to let her arrogant monologue run its course than to interrupt and defend his eldest son. And I watched Liam puff up his chest every single time she tossed him a compliment, as if her toxic arrogance somehow validated his hollow worth. It wasn't just that they were incredibly rude, it was that they didn't even realize it. It was like I was completely invisible, like my existence didn't matter unless I was holding a wrench or a checkbook, and honestly, maybe that's what stung the most. Not the insult from a stranger, not even the blatant lies, but the way my own flesh and blood looked right past me, the way my dad, especially, just let her keep going. He'd always said he just wanted peace in the family, but sometimes peace just means letting someone else get brutally bruised so no one else has to raise their voice. I stood there holding my lukewarm drink, letting the disrespect wash over me. I wasn't angry, not yet. But there was a flicker deep in my chest. The quiet, dangerous spark that comes right before the forest fire. And as Chloe pulled out her phone to show my uncle her LinkedIn profile, bragging about a recent digital campaign I knew for a fact my engineers had actually rescued from total collapse, I quietly reached into my pocket for my own phone. I hadn't planned on checking the company portal, but something primal told me I should. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, maybe it was gut instinct. I opened the secure internal contract dashboard from the E-Tech Nexus admin app, typed in Apex Strategies, and scrolled down to the subcontracting employees listed under the analytics wing. Her name popped up exactly halfway down the glowing screen. Chloe Vance, Senior Account Strategist. Status, non-renewal pending. Reviewed and authorized by Ethan J. Mercer, me. I stared at the glowing letters for a long moment, not saying a single word. And then, very slowly, I smiled. It wasn't a smug smile, and it wasn't malicious. It was just perfectly calm. Because in that exact moment, I realized something incredibly liberating. She had no idea who I was, and neither did the rest of them. I put the phone back in my pocket, looked up, and watched as Chloe laughed loudly at her own joke again, something about how some people are just genetically built to have roommates forever. My dad gave a low chuckle and shook his head in agreement, and that was the exact moment I knew I wasn't going to stay silent much longer. I didn't cause a scene that night. I just left the party a little early, offered a polite, emotionless goodbye to the room, and slipped out the heavy oak door while everyone was still laughing at one of Liam's exaggerated frat house stories. On the dark, rainy drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. I just sat with the heavy rhythm of the windshield wipers. I wasn't even angry. It was more like I was profoundly tired. Tired in that deep, bone-aching way where your body isn't sore, but something inside your chest feels impossibly heavy, like someone's been quietly stacking bricks on your lungs for 20 years. Chloe was just a symptom. The real disease was my family. For years, they treated me like background noise. When Liam got a DUI in college, who quietly paid the $5,000 lawyer fee under the table to keep it off his permanent record? Me. When my mom's roof started leaking during a winter storm and my dad was too busy on a golf trip in Arizona, who spent 2 days freezing on a ladder patching shingles for free? Me. When our Aunt Claire was in hospice care and nobody else could supposedly get time off work, who sat by her bedside for 14 nights straight, feeding her ice chips until she passed? You get the picture. And not once did they say thank you. Not once did they ask if I was drowning. The Monday morning after the housewarming party, I received an automated email from the HR department at Apex Strategies, requesting a formal performance review signature for Chloe's contract extension. Her file had been officially flagged for executive review because she had completely missed 2 major campaign deadlines, and there were severe client-side complaints about her atrocious communication delays. The irony was so rich and thick I almost laughed out loud in my empty office. I didn't sign it right away. I bookmarked the tab and just sat with it. Then, on Tuesday afternoon, I got a text from my mom. Liam has a massive interview this Friday. Can you please help him prep? He said you're good at that boring computer stuff. Maybe help him tweak his resume? We're so proud of him. Proud of you too, honey. I stared at the glowing screen. No. Hello, how are you? Just a blatant demand wrapped up in a fake compliment, like a spoonful of cheap sugar designed to make the guilt go down easier. I didn't respond. Wednesday night, Liam actually called me. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. Yo, Ethan, you busy man? He asked, chewing loudly on something. Not really. I replied flatly. So, I've got this huge Zoom interview coming up. It's for this massive B2B SaaS sales role, and I think it'd be dope if you could help me sound like, I don't know, more legit. I raised an eyebrow, staring at my ceiling. You want me to lie for you? Not lie, bro. Just, fluff it up. I mean, you know how this stuff works. You talk circles around these nerd tech people all the time. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Liam, do you even actually want this job? Dude, come on. It's insane money. Dad said if I lock this down, they'll help with the down payment on that Porsche Macan I've been looking at. Like an early birthday present. I almost dropped my phone. Wait, they were buying him a Porsche? After they practically bought him a waterfront condo? I went completely silent. Hello? He asked, sounding annoyed. Yeah, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm here. Cool. So, can you hop on Zoom with me tomorrow night? Just run through some fake client objections and, show me how to close these nerds. I said yes, not because I wanted to help him, but because I desperately needed to see exactly how far this delusion would go. Thursday came. We did the Zoom call. I gave him basic tips, watching him scribble them down on a legal pad like a middle schooler copying someone else's homework. He kept asking absurd things like, how do I make it sound like I understand what a KPI is without actually defining it? And should I just tell them I'm a master at CRM even though I don't know what those letters stand for? That night, I got another text from my mom. So incredibly proud of Liam lately. He's really finding his stride. Reminds me of your Uncle Pete. You boys are finally both doing fine. The family is so proud. I didn't reply. Friday morning, I logged into the E-Tech Nexus client portal and checked the exact status of the Apex Strategies contract. Chloe's file had a brand new note attached from their lead project manager. Apparently, she had completely mishandled a cross-channel data campaign, and the agency had to comp their biggest client with an $8,500 credit just to keep them from suing. She certainly hadn't mentioned that little detail at the party while she was bragging about her superiority. I still didn't touch the approval file. Not yet. The absolute final straw came on Saturday afternoon. I stopped by my parents' house for a mandatory family lunch. They had been aggressively inviting me, and after dodging their texts all week, I figured I would just face the situation head on. The second I walked through the front door, I could smell overcooked onions and that incredibly dry, burnt meatloaf my mom always made when she wanted to pretend we were a perfect sitcom family. Liam was already there, lounging on the living room sofa, sipping from a bottle of expensive kombucha like it was vintage champagne. Chloe was sitting right next to him. I froze for a split second in the hallway. She looked up and grinned that same toxic grin. Look who finally decided to show up, she chirped. Guess you could finally afford the gas money to drive out here. My dad chuckled nervously from the kitchen. Chloe, come on now. She leaned forward, acting like we were old pals sharing a secret. I'm kidding, Mr. Mercer, I'm just joking around, right, Ethan? I'm not trying to start a class war or anything. I said absolutely nothing. I just smiled a dead, empty smile, walked over, and sat down in the armchair directly across from her. She immediately launched into another long, exaggerated story about some local influencer client she was supposedly hand-holding through a massive rebrand, clearly performing for the entire room. Liam nodded along like a proud, brainless puppy. My mom walked in and placed a thick slice of that dry meatloaf in front of me like it was a grand peace offering. And then, the moment finally arrived. Chloe reached into her oversized designer tote bag, pulled out her sleek silver laptop, and said, actually, Ethan, this is honestly hilarious. But I think one of your little campaigns came across my desk this week. Some tiny, disorganized firm called E-Tech Nexus. Liam laughed loudly, nearly spilling his drink. Yo, that's your little company, right? I stared directly into Chloe's eyes. My voice was dangerously calm. That's mine. Yes. She blinked, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. Wait, seriously? You actually work for them? I own it. She froze completely. The room went dead silent. Oh, huh. I guess I didn't connect the dots. Don't worry, I said casually, picking up my fork. Most people at your pay grade don't. Liam leaned forward, his brow furrowed in confusion. Wait, bro, but you don't own it, right? I started it 10 years ago in my basement. I am the sole owner. Chloe tried desperately to recover her footing, her face flushing a patchy red. That's cool. So, you're what? The CEO? Something exactly like that, I replied, taking a bite of the dry meatloaf. My mom clapped her hands together, beaming with oblivious joy. See, that's exactly why I said we're so proud of both our boys. Everyone is doing just great. But Chloe narrowed her eyes, her fragile ego clearly bruised. Well, it's a very small world, Ethan. We've actually been thoroughly reviewing some of your systems at Apex. There's been a lot of severe redundancy on the back end, just so you know. Your coding is a mess. I raised an eyebrow, putting my fork down. Redundancy? Yeah, she said, flipping her laptop open with a dramatic flair. Your entire cloud stack? It's completely unoptimized for cross-platform CRM integration. It's amateur hour. Just saying. We officially flagged it to management. Liam let out a low, mocking whistle. Damn, Ethan. You gonna let her come for your little company like that? I smiled. A real, genuine smile this time. And then I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, opened the E-Tech Nexus admin dashboard, and slowly turned the glowing screen directly toward Chloe's face. There it was, her full name, her department, her $8,500 penalty note. And, right at the top in bold red letters, pending termination notice. Awaiting final signature from CEO Ethan Mercer. She stared at the screen like it was a loaded gun pointed directly at her forehead. I didn't say a single word. And that silence, that thick, awful, ringing silence was the exact moment the entire power dynamic of my family shattered into a million unfixable pieces. The look on Chloe's face was worth a decade of suffering. Her lips parted slightly, trembling, the smug, arrogant confidence violently drained from her expression like someone had just pulled the plug on a bathtub. She stared at the phone in my hand for a beat way too long, and then, in true performative fashion, she let out a sharp, awkward, terrified laugh, as if she was desperately trying to be the one in on the joke. That's hilarious, she stammered, her voice cracking. Where did you even get a fake screenshot like that? I didn't answer her because I didn't need to. I just tapped the screen, clicked refresh, and let the live server data reload right in front of her eyes. Liam leaned over the coffee table, squinting at the screen. Wait, hold up, is that real? Like, actually real? Still, I said absolutely nothing. I just sat back in the armchair, crossed my legs, and took a slow, deliberate sip of the room temperature tap water my mom had given me. I let the silence burn the oxygen out of the room. Chloe quickly slammed her laptop shut, her hands visibly shaking, and aggressively shoved it back into her tote bag, suddenly acting very interested in checking something on her own phone. My dad, meanwhile, cleared his throat loudly like he was about to give a speech, then cowardly chose to look down at his shoes instead. And my mom, ever the desperate peacemaker, nervously started rambling about the potato casserole she planned to make next weekend, as if a starchy side dish could somehow erase the radioactive tension humming in the air. I finished my slice of dry meatloaf, stood up, and left not long after, calmly stating I had high-level executive work to do, which was true, but not in the pathetic way they had always assumed. Update 1. The rainy drive back to my apartment felt entirely different this time. It wasn't quite clean, like I'd finally taken a deep breath after years of suffocating. But beneath the adrenaline, there was something else. A deep, echoing hollowness I hadn't expected. I had finally hit back after years of swallowing my pride, but the satisfaction didn't sit in my stomach the way I thought it would. That night, I lay awake in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying the exact look on my dad's face. He wasn't surprised, he wasn't defensive, he was just disappointed. Not in Chloe for being a monster, but in me for exposing her. And that is what finally cracked something open inside my soul. Because somewhere deep down, some pathetic, lingering part of me was still that little kid looking for his father's approval. Still waiting for the proud nod, the pat on the back, the, "We see how hard you work, Ethan." And instead, all I had ever gotten was the exact same heavy silence. Or worse, thinly veiled disappointment masked as neutrality. In their eyes, I had embarrassed Chloe, made the lunch uncomfortable, and rocked the sacred family boat. But what about me? What about all the countless times I sat there bleeding and let the boat rock me? I thought about calling my dad and explaining myself, but I stopped dialing. I knew exactly how that conversation would go. "You could have handled that much better, Ethan. It's not worth making drama over. You know how she is. Just be the bigger man and let it go. Let it go. Always, always that exact phrase." The next morning, sitting in my home office with a black coffee, I opened up my company dashboard again, stared at Chloe's termination file, and after a few long, agonizing minutes, I clicked defer review. Not because she deserved mercy. She absolutely didn't. But because I refused to be the villain in a narrative they had already written me into. I didn't need to burn her to the ground with my own hands. I just needed space. But space was impossible to come by. The fallout came fast and brutal. That Monday afternoon, I got a phone call from my mom. No warm greeting, just a tight, venomous voice. "I just talked to Liam. He said you completely humiliated Chloe." I stayed perfectly quiet, listening to her breathe. Was that really necessary, Ethan? Honestly, I know you two didn't get off on the right foot, but this vindictive behavior isn't like you. I finally spoke, my voice cold. What is like me, Mom? Silence on her end. Then, a heavy sigh. You know exactly what I mean. She's very upset. Liam is furious. We just want peace in this family. Peace. There it was again. That cursed, weaponized word. I've been peaceful my entire life, I said softly. Where exactly did that get me? And she didn't answer. She just sighed again and told me she expected a full apology soon so this didn't turn into a permanent thing. I hung up the phone. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. Thanks for watching. I just set the device face down on my desk and stared at the wall. Suddenly, my office felt colder than it ever had. That entire week, I buried myself alive in my work. We had 2 major state projects nearing their final deadlines, one massive grant pitch to finalize, and a department staffing restructure I'd been putting off for months. I skipped a mandatory Sunday family dinner for the first time in a decade and didn't even send a text to explain why. And not once, not a single time did any of them reach out just to ask how I was doing. It was entirely about Chloe. Her fragile feelings, her immense embarrassment, her supposedly misunderstood sense of humor. Meanwhile, I was sinking into a depression. I didn't realize how desperately I needed my family to just see me until it became painfully clear they never actually had. One night, about a week and a half after the meatloaf incident, I got a text from an old friend, Maya. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. She used to work alongside me back when E-Tech Nexus was just the 2 of us huddled around a space heater in a converted basement. Hey stranger. Heard through the Seattle grapevine you're still saving the tech world one over-engineered platform at a time. Coffee sometime? I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen, then typed back, only if you're paying. We met up 2 days later. She looked exactly the same, faded denim jacket, a sarcastic, knowing smile, and sharp eyes that missed absolutely nothing. We caught up over burnt espresso and stale croissants in a half-empty, gloomy cafe near Pike Place. At some point, she leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, and said, "Okay, cut the crap. What's up with you lately? You look like a guy who just realized his dog has been secretly judging him for years." I laughed. I actually, genuinely laughed for the first time in weeks, and I told her everything. Not the polished, PR-friendly version, not the stoic business owner filter, just the raw truth. The ignored older brother. The constant disappointment. The "you're doing fine so shut up and fix my roof" guy. She listened intently, didn't interrupt once, and just nodded slowly. When I finally finished venting, she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Okay, so you've got a crappy, narcissistic family and a therapist's dream of a younger brother. Join the club, Ethan. You want a gold star sticker?" I blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Maya said, her tone dead serious. "Look, I'm not saying they aren't massive jerks, they absolutely are. But you've spent so long being useful to them that you don't even know what it feels like to just exist. You're allowed to be furious, Ethan. You're allowed to stop caring about their feelings." I didn't know what to say, I just stared into my empty coffee cup. "You need a total reset," she said, standing up and tossing a $10 bill on the table. "Let me show you something." She drove me to this tiny, abandoned co-working loft she'd been renting out on weekends. It was all exposed brick walls, giant blank whiteboards, and mismatched secondhand furniture. It was completely empty, dead quiet, and oddly comforting. "Have you ever thought about building something that isn't just a corporate tool for someone else?" she asked, her voice echoing in the empty room. "Something that's just yours? Not for a state client? Not for a massive contract? Just for fun?" Fun. What a strange, foreign word. That night, I went home, dug through my closet, and opened a dusty old sketch pad I hadn't touched in over 7 years. Back when I first started coding, I would draw wild layouts and scribble down insane ideas for applications that didn't make sense to anyone but me. I flipped through pages of half-formed concepts, terrible logos, and margin notes. And one specific idea stuck out. A platform concept I'd had for high-level corporate mentorship. Real-time, anonymous peer coaching and stress testing for people in incredibly high-pressure executive jobs, filtered by industry, role, and psychological profile. I had shelved it years ago, telling myself it was way too niche to ever be profitable. But now it felt like exactly what I needed to build. Over the next 3 weeks, I quietly started coding it from scratch. Nights, weekends, a little bit every single day. No pressure, no investors, no deadlines. Just something entirely mine. Maya helped me test the back end, gave brutal feedback, roasted my terrible UI choices, and encouraged me when I hit a wall. I didn't tell a single soul else. Not my parents, definitely not Liam, and absolutely not Chloe. And with every passing line of code, I felt a little lighter. I wasn't looking for petty revenge anymore. I was looking for peace. Real, untouchable peace. We named the beta platform True North Metrics. But of course, peace never lasts long when your family is aggressively determined to drag you back into the mud. Exactly 3 weeks had passed since the meatloaf lunch. 3 full weeks of absolute silence from my family. No phone calls, no messages, no passive-aggressive group chats, not even a terrible minion meme from my mom. I wasn't sure if they were intentionally freezing me out as a punishment, or if they were just stubbornly waiting for me to break and apologize. Either way, I didn't chase them. I was completely done chasing. I had spent a decade being the one who checked in, the one who reached out, the one who smoothed the jagged edges. This time, they would have to come crawling to me, and for a while, I genuinely thought maybe they wouldn't, until the inevitable text finally came. It was a gloomy Wednesday afternoon. I had just finished an exhausting 3-hour meeting with a new senior developer I'd hired for True North Metrics, which, by the way, was finally starting to look like a fully functional, revolutionary piece of software. We even had a working beta that Maya had stress tested to the absolute brink of server collapse. I was running on 4 hours of sleep and a stomach full of stale vending machine pretzels when my phone lit up. "Mom, can you please come by the house this Sunday? We're doing a family brunch. We would love to see you. We really miss you." I stared at the glowing message for a very long time. Notice the wording. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Let's talk about what happened." Just a polite, sweeping it under the rug summons, like I was a medieval court jester expected to return to my post. Part of me wanted to type "go to hell" and block her number, but the other part of me, the cold, strategic, CEO part, wanted to see exactly what this sudden olive branch was really about. Because my family never reached out unless they needed something. So, I texted back, "Sure, I'll bring some muffins." Sunday morning arrived. It was a rare, clear Pacific Northwest day, one of those mornings where the air feels crisp and completely clean. I wore faded jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and brought a box of expensive blueberry muffins from the artisanal bakery near my corporate office. When I pulled up to my parents' house, I noticed immediately that Liam's car wasn't in the driveway, neither was Chloe's. Inside, my mom was frantically setting the dining room table with an air of forced, manic cheerfulness. My dad stood rigidly by the coffee machine, avoiding eye contact like I was an IRS auditor. "Where's Liam?" I asked casually, setting the bakery box on the counter. "Oh, he and Chloe are taking a little break right now," my mom said quickly, not looking up from the napkins. "They're just giving each other some necessary space." I blinked, hiding my amusement. "Since when?" She waved a hand dismissively. "It's really not important, Ethan." Ah. There it was. The real, hidden reason they had invited me over. The atmosphere in the kitchen had that thick, nervous feeling to it, the kind of tension where people pretend everything is perfectly fine while they are standing knee-deep in water on a sinking ship. I played entirely dumb. I sat down at the table, accepted a cup of black coffee, and simply waited. It didn't take long for the dam to break. My dad cleared his throat loudly halfway through a painfully boring conversation about the neighbor's overgrown lawn, then set his mug down. "So, Ethan, your brother has had a really rough couple of weeks." I nodded slowly, my face a mask of neutrality. "I heard he's in a bit of a bind." Here comes the ask. "What kind of bind?" I asked, taking a slow bite of a blueberry muffin. "Well, he completely lost his job," my mom said gently, her voice wavering. "And with the sudden breakup and everything, he's really been struggling mentally." "And?" My dad immediately jumped in. "He mentioned that you were working on some massive new projects at your company. Big ones. It sounds like things are going incredibly well for you, son." I tilted my head, looking back and forth between them. "Is this the specific part of the brunch where you finally ask if I'm hiring?" They both looked at each other, panic flashing in their eyes. My mom smiled in that tight, desperate, hopeful way. "We just thought, it would mean the absolute world to us if you could just give him a chance, just a small chance." I set my coffee cup down, the ceramic clinking against the wood. "What kind of chance, Mom?" "You know," my dad said, leaning forward. "Maybe bring him on board. Let him be an executive assistant or something. Just to get him back on his feet and rebuild his confidence." So, there it was, the ultimate audacity. After absolutely everything, the decades of emotional neglect, the blatant, sickening favoritism, the disrespect at the party, the humiliation at the meatloaf lunch, they genuinely wanted me to rescue their golden boy again. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. What exactly happened with his job at Apex Strategies? They hesitated, exchanging another panicked glance. I already knew the truth, of course. Word travels fast in the tech consulting network. After Chloe's $8,500 mistake and her spectacular, tear-filled exit, she had been forced to resign before HR could officially finalize the termination I had deferred. Liam's entire department came under intense executive scrutiny. His specific role had been restructured, which, in corporate jargon, means, "We realized you contribute absolutely nothing of value and we don't want to pay your salary anymore." He had burned his bridge, and now he was desperately swimming toward my private island. My mom softened her voice, reaching out to touch my hand. I pulled it away slightly. He's really trying, Ethan. He just needs someone in this world to believe in him. I let the deafening silence hang in the air for a full 10 seconds. I watched them squirm. Then, I gave a single, slow nod. Okay, I said quietly. Her face lit up like a Christmas tree. Really? You mean it? Sure, I said, standing up to leave. Tell him to email me his resume by tonight. That Sunday night, I got the email. Liam's resume was an absolute joke. It was 2 full pages of inflated corporate buzzwords, terrible formatting, and completely fake achievements, including a strategic lead role on a data project I personally knew he had nothing to do with because he was literally on vacation in Miami while his team built it. But I didn't delete the PDF. No. Instead, I started meticulously planning. Because I realized something profound in that moment, I had vastly more power than they ever gave me credit for. And if I played this game perfectly, I could finally teach them what it truly feels like to be on the receiving end of the imbalance. But, not by screaming, not by throwing a childish tantrum. By doing what I do best, executing a flawless system. Update 2. The execution of my plan was entirely quiet. I immediately reached out to Maya and told her I had a very weird, highly specific favor to ask. I needed her to act as a ruthless corporate tech recruiter. Fake name, fake firm, fake LinkedIn profile. I needed her to call Liam about an exclusive position at a fast-scaling tech startup looking for a hungry SDR with extreme grit. The kind of job that sounded incredibly flashy and fun to a frat boy, but was ultimately a high-pressure, metric-driven nightmare. Maya laughed so hard over the phone she started coughing. So, you're just handing him the rope? I'm just showing him where the cliff is, I replied smoothly. Whether he trips over his own ego or jumps off is entirely up to him. Meanwhile, from my official E-Tech Nexus email, I sent Liam a polite, generic rejection letter. I stated that we unfortunately weren't hiring at the moment due to budget restructuring, but I wished him the best of luck in his endeavors. Within 4 days, Maya, operating under the alias Rachel, reported back to me. Liam had swallowed the bait whole. He had aggressively scheduled a Zoom interview, and during the call, he actually bragged to her about how he grew up around tech and had massive inside connections in the Seattle industry. It was proceeding exactly as I had modeled. But the trap wasn't the fake job offer itself. The real trap was what would happen after he accepted it. While that psychological experiment played out, I kept grinding away on True North metrics. We finally pushed the beta version out to a few massive nonprofit organizations who agreed to run it internally. The feedback we received was staggering. Real, exhausted corporate employees were using the platform to navigate severe burnout, toxic workplace stress, and gross leadership gaps. For the first time in a very long time, I was building something that genuinely mattered, not just for a profit margin, but for human beings. It felt incredibly good, clean, freeing, and then, the final, beautiful piece of karma fell into place. One of our major municipal contracts at E-Tech Nexus, a citywide education data initiative, had recently been passed off to a new partner firm for local implementation. That specific firm happened to be a boutique consulting agency co-owned by someone who used to work closely with Apex Strategies. And guess who they had just hired on a probationary, junior contractor basis? Chloe. Small, terrifying world, right? I ran into her at a massive downtown Seattle tech conference mixer. She didn't see me at first. She was standing near the open bar, talking very animatedly to a group of men about her new start, and how toxic agency environments only make you a stronger leader. I stood about 10 feet away, silently sipping my sparkling water, until she finally turned her head and locked eyes with me. Her face instantly froze. The color drained from her cheeks. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just gave her a single, microscopic nod. Just enough to remind her, I see you. I own the ground you are standing on. And then I turned and walked away. The real setup wasn't about humiliating her in public. It was about letting her live with the creeping paranoia that no matter where she went in this city, she would always be walking through digital doors that I built and controlled. Now, the board was set. Liam had taken the bait. Chloe was terrified. My parents had absolutely no idea the game was even being played. All that was left was the final, devastating move. The week it all came crashing down, I barely had to lift a finger. Liam had been arrogantly hyping himself up in our family group chat for 6 straight days. Not directly to me, of course, just to my mom and dad. Massive tech opportunity, guys. He kept calling it insane startup energy, but with real Silicon Valley capital. He dropped ridiculous buzzwords he clearly didn't understand and humble bragged about his grueling third-round interview with Rachel. My mom responded with endless prayer hands emojis and told him she always knew he'd find his golden lane. I didn't type a single word in the chat. It was surreal. Honestly, watching it unfold was like watching a slow-motion train derailment where you already have the NTSB crash report in your hands. Because here is the beautiful truth, I wasn't actually setting him up to fail. I wasn't entirely faking a job offer just for a cruel punchline. The job role did exist, technically. Maya's recruiting firm had been set up as a legitimate test branch for True North metrics, designed specifically to simulate high-pressure work environments and track exactly how applicants responded under extreme stress and complex tasks. It was a fully opt-in, legal structure part of a controlled psychological research pilot we were running, with heavy transparency clauses buried deep in the terms of service. But let's be entirely real here. Liam never read the terms of service. He just blindly clicked agree, signed the digital contract, and started performing his circus act. His specific role was a 1-4-day contract, trial basis, 100%, commission only. The exact kind of brutal position real, hungry grinders use to prove their worth, not trust fund babies trying to cosplay as tech entrepreneurs. By day 3, he was already whining in the family chat. They're on my neck like every single hour. He texted my dad. Want constant updates like I'm some kind of robot. Not cool, man. The whole place is chaotic. They need my leadership structure. Oh, the absolute irony. By day 6, Maya called me, practically in tears from laughing. Ethan, he literally just tried to sell our proprietary software back to one of our own fake competitors, she gasped. Like, actual cold outreach to a dummy firm I set up. He said he had deep connections and thought it would impress the board. I smiled coldly. Flag it, put it in the final report, let him twist in the wind. On day 14, he was formally let go via a sterile, corporate performance email. It was completely respectful, brutally honest, and digitally signed by Rachel, with a generic HR footer. He was absolutely livid. My mom called me in a panic that night. I let it go straight to voicemail. Her recorded voice sounded tight, defensive, and accusatory. Ethan, I don't know what is going on with that awful company Liam was working for, but he said it was the most toxic, abusive place he's ever seen. People yelling at him, confusing impossible tasks. They just dropped him without any warning. Can you believe that? Oh, I could believe it, but I wasn't done yet. Not until I told them the absolute truth and made sure the scar was permanent. The golden opportunity came that weekend during what was supposed to be a healing family check-in brunch. My mom had aggressively insisted it would clear the air and bring everyone back together to support poor Liam. I didn't trust her motives for a second, but I said yes. I had been patient long enough. We met at a pretentious little diner they loved in Bellevue. Crisp white tablecloths, fake wildflowers in mason jars, and a chalkboard menu written in irritating pastel cursive. I showed up exactly 5 minutes early. They showed up 25 minutes late. Liam strutted into the restaurant wearing expensive dark sunglasses indoors, like he was desperately trying to disguise his massive failure as high fashion. My dad gave me a stiff, awkward handshake. My mom hugged me a second too long, like her maternal guilt was a cheap perfume she was trying to rub off onto my shirt. So, my mom said nervously once we were all seated and the waitress had poured the water. I know it's been incredibly tense lately, but we're still a family. And family means everything. I sipped my black coffee, saying nothing. Liam leaned back in his wooden chair, crossing his arms aggressively. Look, man. I don't know what the hell is going on with your ego lately, but I get it. You're successful or whatever. Congrats on the money, but don't sit there and act like you're inherently better than us. I slowly lowered my coffee cup. I raised an eyebrow. Is that what you honestly think I've been doing? He scoffed, rolling his eyes behind the sunglasses. I'm just saying it's not cool to constantly look down on people. You totally embarrassed Chloe for no reason, then you acted like I was some pathetic loser for needing a job hookup, like you've never had a rough patch in your perfect little life. I stared at him for a very long, very heavy moment. The diner around us seemed to fade away. Then, I reached down into my leather messenger bag, pulled out a thick, spiral-bound black folder, set it gently on the white tablecloth, and slid it directly across to him. What the hell is this? He asked, frowning at the cover. Your rough patch. Fully documented, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. The past 14 days of your massive tech opportunity. Every single email interaction, every skipped assignment, every failed cold call, every lie you told to management. Complete with exact timestamps and audio transcripts. He flipped the heavy cover open. He stared at the first page, confused, and then his face slowly, dramatically paled to a sickly white. My mom leaned over his shoulder, her eyes darting across the text. Wait, Ethan, how did you possibly get this? She stammered, her hands shaking. I didn't get it, I said, leaning forward and resting my elbows on the table. I commissioned it. Absolute, deafening silence. What? Liam whispered, his voice thin and cracking. I own the corporate pilot program you just spectacularly failed out of. I said calmly, looking him dead in the eyes. True North metrics. It's mine. My code. My company. You didn't get recruited by Rachel, Liam. You got studied. My dad violently stiffened, nearly knocking his water glass over. You did what? I turned my gaze to my parents. I gave you exactly the chance you begged me for. I reviewed his fake resume, I watched his embarrassing Zoom interviews. I gave him a real, unvarnished opportunity to show exactly who he is when nobody is holding his hand or wiping his nose, and he blew it. Monumentally. Liam looked like he had just been physically struck across the jaw. He ripped off his sunglasses. "You set me up, you sick freak." "No," I replied, my voice rising just enough to cut through his panic. "You set yourself up, I just finally stopped patting the ground where you fall." He violently shoved the heavy folder away, sending a fork clattering to the floor. "This is insane. You honestly think doing this makes you the good guy?" "No," I said, standing up from the table. "I think it makes me free." My mom blinked rapidly, tears finally spilling over her eyelashes as she desperately tried to hold on to her shattered narrative. "Ethan, please. This is so cruel." He was trying his best. "No, Mom," I said, my voice finally cracking with 20 years of suppressed rage. I was trying for years while you completely ignored my existence. While you praised his every drunken stumble as if it were a heroic leap. While you watched me carry the financial and emotional weight of this family on my back and still had the audacity to ask why I wasn't smiling more. I threw a $50 bill onto the table to cover the coffees I hadn't finished. I am completely done being the background character in a miserable story I wrote the code for. They didn't follow me out of the diner. They didn't call my name. They just sat there, frozen in absolute, stunning silence, staring at the black binder of truth, and I didn't look back once. That was exactly 8 months ago. Since that Sunday, I have cut all contact with them. Not out of spite, and not to teach them a lesson. Out of pure, biological necessity. The space has been clean, quiet, and profoundly healing. True North Metrics officially launched to the public last month and immediately landed its first major institutional partnership with a Fortune 500 company. Maya is now my official co-founder. We have 12 full-time staff members, and the emotional feedback we are getting from real users is better than I ever dreamed possible. Through the grapevine, I heard Liam was forced to sell the waterfront condo and moved back into my parents' guest room. He's apparently trying to get into crypto day trading now. I genuinely wish him luck, he's going to need it. As for Chloe, she got let go from the boutique consulting firm after her probationary period ended. Turns out, coasting on toxic charm and fake confidence only gets you so far when people actually require you to read your own spreadsheets. Sometimes, late at night, I think about unblocking my dad's number just to say, "See, look at what I built." But then I remember the real, painful lesson I learned through all of this. I never actually needed them to see me. I just needed to stop shrinking myself so they could feel big. And the day I finally stopped doing that was the day my real life began, because sometimes, bridges aren't burned out of petty anger. Sometimes, they are torched to the ground simply to light the dark road forward. Top comments. User 1. I am literally standing up and clapping in my living room right now. The way you didn't just fire back, but entirely dismantled his ego with data and timestamps? Absolutely surgical. Your parents enabled a monster and you handed them the receipt. User 2. As a fellow glass child who was always ignored while my siblings got bailed out, this hits so incredibly close to home. The piece they always talk about is just your silent suffering. So proud of you for building True North Metrics and finally choosing yourself. User 3. The fact that Chloe tried to lecture the literal CEO about back-end redundancies while having a pending termination notice on her file is the most delicious poetic justice I've ever read on this app. Enjoy your piece, Ethan. You earned every single drop of it.